Good morning. I'm Lisa Holloway-Attaway, and I work here at the University of Huevda as an associate professor teaching within the computer games education. And I'm very pleased to get to briefly introduce Warren Spector, who's our first speaker of the day today, and who is going to be speaking about a philosophy of video games, which might be a slightly different title than that in your program. But it promises to, I think, set the tone for an exciting second day of the conference. And I can say just a little bit about Warren, that he has been making games for over 30 years. So we're very pleased to have his expertise. He began in 1983 working in tabletop games. And then in 1989, he began working in digital games and has worked for just a range of studios and companies. He's also a published novelist and a comic book author. And he currently is in Austin, the Austin studio director for Other Side Entertainment, where he's working on System Shock 3. So please help me welcome Warren Spector. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming out. I know it's early for game developers, that's for sure. I think it's 2 in the morning for me, but anyway, yeah, and I'm also sorry about the title of the talk. If you were expecting something about tools and something else, I don't even know where that came from. So I am not going to be speaking about that. Also, I was planning on starting by explaining who I am, but now my thunder has already been stolen from me. But so let me tell you a little bit about who I am, just so you know. I am a 33-year veteran of game development, and it kind of blows my mind when I think about that. Someday you will all be 33-year veterans and wondering where the time went. But in that time, I've worked at Steve Jackson Games, at TSR, the folks who do Dungeons & Dragons, Origin Systems, where the Ultima and Wing Commander games came from. I worked at Looking Glass, which did Underworld and System Shock and Thief. Ion Storm, where I made Deus Ex, and then started my own studio, Junction Point, where we made Disney Epic Mickey. In that time, I've worked on dozens of tabletop games, including Toon. Someone was asking me what my first game was. That was my first game. You can still buy it. If you do, I'll get about half a penny. I still get royalties from it, so please go and buy Toon. But I've worked on many games, 24 in all, including the 2 Epic Mickey games when I was at Disney. Again, you already know this, but I've written choose your own adventure books and novels and comic books. If you ever get the chance to write comic books, do it. It's a ton of fun. I've worked for huge companies, and I've done startups. I've created a game development program at the University of Texas and taught game development for 2 years. And now I'm a partner in another startup, Other Side Entertainment, where we're working on some new games in the Underworld series, which is coming back after 25 years or something. And now, as you already know, I'm working on System Shock 3, which is a continuation of a series I helped create back in the 90s. So that's me. I've been around a long time and done enough things that I've developed some strong opinions about the medium of video games. And so today I want to share some of those opinions with you. For starters, lots of people think games are just entertainment. Just entertainment. It's a way to pass some time, way to experience an adrenaline rush, maybe a way to think about optimal strategies to solve an arbitrary problem. This is one definition that I actually like quite a bit. Katie Salen and Eric Zimmerman wrote a book called Rules of Play, which if you haven't read it, you should. It's a pretty remarkable book. But they described games as a system in which players engage in an artificial conflict defined by rules that results in a quantifiable outcome. That's a pretty good definition as far as it goes. You can't really argue with it, but it's a little reductionist for me. It doesn't provide much guidance for developers. If you're a developer, what do you do with that definition? And for me, it kind of reinforces the idea that games are a simple thing with no real purpose. And I think we need to think, as developers, we need to think more deeply than that about what we do. When you make a game, I think you have to have a purpose. You have to have a reason for making a game. Specifically, you have to have a reason for making the game that you're making. There are lots of games that could be made. Why are you making this one? So that definition that Salen and Zimmerman came up with kind of begs us to ask questions like, what kind of systems is your game? What kind of system is your game? What kind of conflicts do you provide? What kind of outcome? And why should players care? That last one is really important. Why should your players care about what you're doing? Your team should care what you're doing. And only when you can answer questions about success and conflict and outcomes and caring, only then can you define success. You need to know not just what you're going to do, you need to know how you're going to do it, but you need to know how you're going to know when you've done it well. You have to know when you're finished. You need a definition of success. Now, developers define success in a variety of ways over the years. Some of them value sales and revenue and profit. Don't tell any publishers about this, but I could care less about this. My only obligation to a publisher is to sell one more copy of a game than necessary for them to fund my next game. I could care less about maximizing profitability and your quarterly numbers and all that. But for some people, sales, revenue, profit, that's the definition of success. For some people, it's about pride. It's about your team or you feeling like you've done something really great. That's a successful project, when your team takes pride in what they've done. Some people make games for the ego gratification that goes along with critical acclaim, or the validation, maybe. Maybe I shouldn't go right to ego, but the validation that comes from recognition from outsiders that you've done a good job. And some make games just to provide some fun. We can take this out into the hall afterwards, but I think fun is a useless word. I don't allow people to use the word fun in my studio. It's meaningless, and it doesn't help anybody in making a game. But we can argue about that later. That's a whole other talk. But for some people, fun is the definition of success. So is that all? Are those the only success criteria that are out there? Obviously, I don't think so, or I wouldn't be here. Let me tell you about my success criteria. Now, I'm not doing this because I think I'm right, or because mine are the only ones or the ones you should pay attention to. My success criteria, I want to talk about it because basically it's all I can talk about. I can only speak from my personal experience. And also just to show you that I have a mission, okay? And I think it's important that all of you have a mission too. If you're going to survive for 33 years as a game developer, a sense of mission is really important. So my success definition consists of 4 things, and I'm going to talk about each of those 4 things today. The first is player empowerment. Have I empowered players to tell their stories in collaboration with me? That's my first success criterion. Have I delivered one thing in a game that no one in the world has ever seen or done before? Just one. Have I allowed players to see the world through the eyes of someone unlike themselves, to walk in someone else's shoes? And have I made a game that's about something beyond what's just on the surface? Have I made players think? So those are the 4 things that are most important to me. It's not, yes, I want to make money. Yes, I have an ego the size of this building, okay? And I love it when people say you've done great work. But these 4 things are really what define success for me. So it's a mission, okay? So even if you disagree with me at the end of this talk, I hope at least you'll think about what your mission is, and we can argue about it out in the hall afterwards, okay? All right, so the first thing, player empowerment. This is really kind of pathetic. it all began with Dungeons and Dragons for me. I played D&D for the first time in 1978, and it was literally life-changing for me. How many people have played D&D? I can barely see you. Okay, good. So you've all had that life-changing moment. My dungeon master was a guy named Bruce Sterling, who, along with William Gibson, was kind of the father of the cyberpunk science fiction movement. He was a great storyteller. But what made the experience of playing D&D that night in 1978 special wasn't being told a story by Bruce. It was that my friends and I were telling a story with Bruce. Okay, we had to use our wits and exploit some pretty vague game rules, as those of you who played D&D know. They're pretty vague. We had to figure out ourselves how to overcome the obstacles that Bruce threw at us. The shape of the story belonged to Bruce, and it was a great shape, but every detail belonged to me and to my friends. It was like a great band. We all worked together to create something that none of us could create alone. And that night in 1978, we all became storytellers. And I was completely hooked. I mean, there's been no looking back for me. I was working on my doctorate at the time, and believe me, my studies definitely suffered when I started playing D&D. I played in that D&D campaign with these friends and with Bruce for 10 years. If I stopped to tell you how it ended, I would start crying on stage, and you would think I'm an absolute boob, which I probably am. But anyway, my entire professional life has been about recreating that feeling that I had back in 1978 playing D&D and telling stories with my friends. Now, some fellow developers share that idea that digital games, like tabletop games, can be about telling stories together, okay, and creating your own story. We call that idea shared authorship. Every game I've worked on has been, about that idea since. And with each game, I try to give up a little bit more of my control, my authorial control, to collaborate more fully with players, to engage in a more equal dialogue with them. Because here's the deal, okay? Just think about this. Alone among the arts, we can share the responsibilities and joys of storytelling with our users, with our audience. Now, we don't always engage players in this way. There are a lot of game developers think that their story is the important thing and their creativity is the important thing. I basically disagree with that. But we can collaborate with players to tell stories and to create experiences. And because we can do that, and because it's something that only games can do, we kind of have a moral obligation to do it, in my mind. Now, sharing authorship involves allowing players to choose how to interact with the game world. They want to solve problems the way they want to, and we should allow them to do that. It's not about how clever and creative you are as a designer. It's about how clever and creative players can be in interacting with the game worlds and the problems and the situations you create. If you're a game designer and you think it's about you, just leave now, okay? It's not about you, right? In my ideal world, in which we really basically do not live, but in my ideal world, those choices that players make as they interact with your game world tell more about them as human beings than they do about the 64 pixel tall little avatar or puppet they're controlling on the screen. I want to tell a story with players, not to players. And I want players learning about themselves as they play. Okay? So let me put it another way. We're the first medium in human history that's two-way. Okay? It's not about me telling a story to you or me telling you what to do. It's about us deciding together how the experience is going to unfold. Okay? Players are your collaborators in the creative process. Now, in traditional media, the audience is sort of funneled along a path. In a movie, the shots are all going to play out in the same order. In a novel, the words are not going to rearrange themselves on the page. By By contrast, games allow players to make decisions on their own as they play. Sharing authorship means allowing players to make significant choices, giving them as many opportunities as possible to control the experience through their actions. All right, so players make significant choices. If you buy anything I'm saying, that's step one. Let them make significant choices. Step two is about consequences. Player choices should have understandable, logical consequences. Okay, if a player does thing X, then thing Y is going to happen. And if you're making a really clever game, if a player does thing X, maybe it's Y or maybe it's Z or maybe it's A. Okay, sharing authorship means players aren't on a roller coaster. They're not just going down a single path. They're in a sandbox where their choices really matter. Okay. But there's more than that. Choice and consequence are great as far as they go, but the game also has to respond. Okay, the game world has to say, hey player, that's an interesting choice. Here's what happens as a result of that choice. They need to experience it. They need to see it. Okay, what happens if you pull a trigger in a game? And in most games, that's all you can do. But in a game of choice and consequence, you need to show the player what happens if they pull that trigger. But you also need to show the player what happens if they don't pull that trigger. Okay, so sharing authorship means letting players see the results of what they do. And all of that adds up to one of the most remarkable things about games is that each person who plays, each time they play, they have a unique experience. It's not just about, hey, wasn't it cool? No, I was going to name a real game. I'm not going to do that. It's not just about, hey, wasn't it cool when you jumped across that chasm and you almost slipped, but then you grabbed on and you got out your gun and there was a wolf there and you shot the wolf, and every player describes the same experience. If that's the game you want to make, just go make a movie. In a game of choice and consequence, a game of shared authorship, each session is unique. So players have a conversation like, wasn't it cool when you leaped across the chasm? And another player says, what chasm? That's kind of the ideal for me. So the implication of all this is pretty simple. Games are about collaboration for me. Collaboration results in shared authorship. And to bring it all back around to where we started, shared authorship requires player empowerment. When we're at our best, neither the developer nor the player can claim complete ownership of the experience. Okay? No other medium. Again, I keep coming back to that because we are an amazing medium and we are unique. We are unlike any other medium in the history of humankind. And this, I think, is the heart of what makes us unique. No other medium can make the claim that creator and user are equal collaborators. Okay? So that's hugely important to me. So that's the first part of my mission. The second thing is the second success criterion for me is whether I'm delivering something new, one thing that no one on the planet's ever seen or done before. Frankly, if you're just copying other people's work, why bother? First of all, it's boring for developers, but also, games have been around for 40 years. We're still a young medium, and we're still trying to figure out what we can do and what we can be. If you think games are a solved problem, you need to think harder, okay? So if you look at, just let me cop a tude for a minute. If you look at mainstream AAA games today, you see a lot of games that look and feel like each other or like other games. Sometimes you see a lot of games that feel like old games, except with prettier pictures. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to lose friends because I'm giving a talk in Skövde, Sweden. But I bet you can think of plenty of games that are just like all the other games. I mean, how many first-person shooters do we need where you're the last space marine standing between the Earth and alien invasion? I mean, we don't need any more of those. Don't make any of those. But even some of the best-selling games in the world today are retreads of other games. That's not good enough. Like I said, we're too young a medium to assume we know everything or we've gone as far as we need to go. We have to keep searching for the new, the different, the unique, and the wonderful. Okay, so before somebody gives me a hard time, let me be clear. The indie scene, thank God for the indie scene, is full of innovative titles. All right, they're pushing the boundaries of what games can be in a way that the AAA developers really have a hard time doing. Okay, and let me also be clear, just so I don't lose friends, that there are some AAA developers who are pushing the boundaries of the medium. It's just that I'm greedy and I want more. Okay, so let me give you some examples of what I think of when I think of the one new thing from my own games. Not because I feel like I've succeeded, not because I'm such a hotshot developer, but just because it's all I can really talk about, because it's all I really know. So in Deus Ex, we just did a couple of new things. There really wasn't much that was extraordinary about the game, really. So the first thing was I wanted to take 3 different genres and mash them up, because I thought if we took first-person shooters and stealth games and role-playing games and mashed them together, we would come up with something new. Sometimes a new combination of old things can be a new thing. So that was one new thing that we did. We mashed up genres in a new way. Another thing was I set a rule at the studio that no one was allowed to say the word puzzle. Okay? We didn't create puzzles. Puzzle implies that a developer, a designer, comes up with some crazy problem, and there's only one way to solve it, the way the designer intended, and then players have to read the designer's mind to solve that problem. It's like there's a classic game that I'm not going to name, and if any of you know it, don't shout it out, just keep it to yourself. But there was one game where there was a locked door, and right next to it there was a set of shelves, and on the shelves there were different colored cans, and you had to put the cans in a specific color order to unlock the door. Really? I mean, that's a puzzle, okay? One thing that we wanted to do in Deus Ex was create problems, not puzzles, okay? We wanted players solving the problems that we created the way they wanted to, okay? It gets back to all that shared authorship stuff. But what that did was it really did ensure that no 2 players had the same experience. So problems, not puzzles. Interesting combination of genres. That was really about all we did that was new in Deus Ex. And yet people are still talking about the game today, 15 years later. So let me talk a little bit about Epic Mickey. I've only got half an hour, man. I could talk for days about all this stuff. Okay, but Epic Mickey had the one new thing too. That one new thing was our core mechanic of paint and thinner. I don't know if any of you played. Did any of you play Epic Mickey? Yeah, like 3 of you. Okay, there you go. Everybody loved that game except gamers. It was weird. Anyway, in Epic Mickey, we decided that we would let players decide when they were going to draw things, fill things in, and when they were going to erase them. Okay. Now there had been other games that let you destroy geometry, destroy terrain, which we did, but as far as I know, no game before Epic Mickey had actually let you restore things that you destroyed or restore things that were already destroyed in the world. And the consequences for that choice, do I paint this or do I erase it? The consequence was that the game played out differently. Okay, so again, we're back to shared authorship. So players really could decide. That was the first time anybody had ever done that. Do I create or do I destroy in a game? So one new thing. Okay, that's the second success criterion for me. The third element is letting players walk in someone else's shoes. Frankly, I don't think I've ever come close to succeeding at this. I mean, not once ever. But I'm committed to trying. I mean, the fact that I've failed every single time to do this is part of the reason why I subject myself to the hell that is game development. And if any of you are game developers, you know that there are great joys in development, but there is also great pain. And the fact that I haven't done this successfully yet is one of the reasons I keep doing it. So there's a columnist, David Brooks. He writes for the New York Times. And recently, he wrote a piece called "The Big Decisions," and I'm going to risk losing all of you out there and having you all fall asleep because I want to read a quote from it because it's instructive and interesting. So here's what David Brooks said. Let's say you had the chance to become a vampire. With one magical bite, you would gain immortality, superhuman strength, and a life of glamorous intensity. Your friends who have undergone the transformation say the experience is incredible. The difficulty of the choice is that you'd have to use your human self and preferences to try to guess whether you'd enjoy having a vampire self. Becoming a vampire is transformational. You would literally become a different self. How can you possibly know what it would feel like to be this different version of you, or whether you would like it? So that's what David Brooks had to say. You can't know whether you're going to like being a vampire because you're just a human. Well, as the quote implies, the article's about the unknowability of how you'll feel when you have to make a life-changing, truly consequential life choice. Brooks, this writer, has no answer for this. How will you know? He has no answer. Now, I don't know if David Brooks plays games, though for some reason I assume he doesn't. If he did play games, though, he'd know that we as a medium actually provide the answer to his question. Okay? Games offer the opportunity for players to try out behaviors that we wouldn't want them trying in real life. You don't just watch someone else. You don't just think about what someone else is doing. You become someone not like you when you're playing a game. It's another way in which we're unique among media. Books can't do it, movies can't do it, theater can't do it, painting can't do it, ballet can't do it, opera can't. No other medium can let you experience for yourself life choices and the unknowable consequences of your choices. Nothing other than games. How else am I ever going to experience life as a fighter, a World War I fighter pilot? How am I going to know what it's like to be a knight living in a medieval castle? How am I going to know, to use Brooks' example, what it's going to be like to be a vampire? Frankly, we can go even further. If we're really trying, we can let you feel for yourself the sting of racism or religious persecution or gender bias. You could even know what it's like to be the last space marine standing between the Earth and alien invasion. But like I said, we already do that pretty well, so don't do that again. So to David Brooks, if he were standing here, what I would say to him is, take a look over here. You know, there's a medium that answers your question. We can let you live your choices and see what happens as a result. Maybe you should give it a try. Play some games. You might actually learn what it's like to be a vampire and be able to make an intelligent choice about it when Dracula comes along and bites you in the neck or offers to. Okay? You might learn something about yourself, actually. Okay, so that's the third thing. The fourth thing, make a statement. All right? Do you have something important you want players to explore? In my opinion, and it's just my opinion, every developer should make sure they have something to say before they start saying it. Before they start working on a game, okay, they should think, do I have something worth saying? We're as capable of making profound statements as any other medium. We often, I think we still have this little bit of an inferiority complex, a medium inferiority complex, that we're somehow not as profound as movies or books or television or whatever. And we are, okay? You'd think have something to say before you say it would be kind of self-evident, but I'm not sure it is. But let me actually correct myself. Games shouldn't make statements. Okay. The important part of these success criteria is that we let players explore. We bring them into the creative process. Okay. Here's where we come back to all that choice and consequence stuff. So think about this. Ask questions. If you really want to make a statement, go make a movie or write a novel. It's a great way to make a statement. Tell players, here's what I think. Games shouldn't make statements. They can and they should ask players to consider and ponder questions. Okay, if in a novel or a movie, what is your role as a viewer or as a reader? You get to interpret. I get to say, when I wrote my novel, I got to say, here's what I think. And readers got to say, well, I disagree. Or I agree. And that was it. That was the extent of their contribution to the process. In a movie, same thing. You get to agree or disagree. You get to interpret. In a game, you get to answer the, "You're kidding, I have 5 minutes." Okay, moving right along really quickly. In Deus Ex, you get to decide how the world should look at the end of the game. Every NPC has a worldview, and you get to decide whether they're right or wrong. The developer asks questions, players answer them. So let me give you some more examples. Okay, so Deus Ex was really about what happens when you throw a guy who believes in right and wrong into a world that's all black and all shades of gray, just like the real world. What would the world look like if conspiracies were true? What does it mean to be human in a world where human augmentation is a reality? It's a world we're actually living in now. And how should the world be? It's not about defeating a boss monster. It's about deciding how the world should look at the end of the game. You're in control of that as a player. Okay. Now, I don't even think my team knew that those were the questions that I wanted players exploring. You don't want to say, "Here are the questions." You want players exploring those questions, answering for themselves through their choices during play. Epic Mickey was about different questions. How important are family and friends to you? Is it better to be powerful but alone, or less powerful but having friends who will help you? Is it more important to save every kitten that's stuck up a tree to help individuals out? Or is it better to just get on with the work of saving the world? Okay, local problems versus global problems. What happens when you're rooted in the past and can't forgive someone for a wrong they have done you? And what does it mean to be forgotten and ignored? Something we've all felt, but in a game we can let you explore it. In Epic Mickey, players were exploring those questions even if they never realized it. And for everyone who says a game can't ask deep questions, all I will say is even a cartoon mouse can be the vehicle for asking big questions. Okay? So those are the things that sum up my philosophy, the things that define my mission. Now, typically I have failed. One of my mottos is fail gloriously. And I hope I have failed gloriously at achieving all 4 of those things in every game I've done. But you got to keep trying. That's how I define success. But why is all this philosophy stuff important? Well, first of all, if you know what defines success for you, it can help you decide where you want to work. Now, sometimes you just have to go get a job. I get that. But you're going to be a lot happier if you're working at a place where your personal success criteria match the success criteria of the place you're working. You're going to be much happier. You can decide who to partner with. If you're looking for a publisher or a funding partner, knowing that their success criteria are in alignment with yours can help you make the right decision about who to partner with. I don't have time to name names of people I wouldn't work with. It can help you decide what projects to do. When people come to me to work with me, I tell them, if you want to make a sports game, this is probably not the place for you. If you want to make a puzzle game, this is not the place for you. Knowing your success criteria can help you, if you're running the studio, what project to make, and it'll tell you who to hire and who not to. Okay. And frankly, as you become as experienced as me, you'll start thinking about your legacy, about what you've left behind. And you don't want to look back. Trust me, 33 years from now, you don't want to look back on your life and your career and wish you had done more meaningful work. All right? So knowing how you define success, knowing what your mission is critically important. And finally, I said this earlier, we're still a young medium. And your personal goals, your success criteria, your mission may be just the thing we need to grow up a little. Your medium needs you, okay? Not to repeat the past, but to make the future. We have a glorious future ahead of us, and I don't want us to squander it. The world of games in 2016 is a frontier, and no one knows how to tame it. No one at Electronic Arts, no one at Ubisoft, no one standing up here spouting about philosophy. No one knows what the future of games looks like. And maybe you're the one. Okay? So, start thinking about your success criteria. You don't have to agree with mine. Get a start at knowing who you are as a developer. Even if you've been working for 10 years, if you haven't been thinking about this, start thinking, okay? Figure out what's important to you. And I guarantee you'll do better work. You'll be more professionally fulfilled. And I promise you, as you look back, 33 years from now, you'll be glad you did this, okay? So that is the too short version of what I had to say today. Thank you. I don't know, is there time for questions? So I've been told there's no time for questions, but I'll be out and about. You can grab me and argue with me, and we'll have some fun.